would now like to hand over to Democratic Services to read the housekeeping note.
Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website and on YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. Please use your microphone when speaking and remember to switch it off. Please switch any mobile devices to silent. If the fire alarm rings, please leave the room immediately and use the nearest fire exit. Do not use the lift. Please go to the fire assembly point in the car park. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Please would members introduce themselves during the meeting, if not already introduced. Apologies, do we have?
Yep, one apology from Councillor Jackie England, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda is appointment of a Vice Chairman of this committee. I would like to nominate Councillor John Adams. Is someone going to second this? Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay, I declare Councillor John Adams elected as Vice Chairman of this committee. Okay. I don't think there's no badge of office or anything.
Oh,
okay, item 2, which is minutes. Can we approve the minutes of the meeting on the 25th of October? Thank you. Item 3, does any member have any declarations of interest for an item on the agenda? Thank you. Item 4, public participation. There are no members of the public here today. Right, item 5, conclusion of the 22-23 audit process. So I'm going to ask Paul Whittles is going to talk to us about this.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Paul Whittles, the Assistant Director for Finance. Further to the delegations granted at the previous meeting, this report simply confirms to members that all matters regarding the completion of the 22-23 audit process concluded as expected and in line with the 13th of December backstop date. There were no material changes from previous iterations that have been brought to members, so I wasn't expecting to do anything in particular, but just wanted to advise that the final version of the reports are on the Council's website. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Davis.
Sorry, it's not there. It's not so much a question on that. Don't worry. It's just that are we having presentations today because the screens aren't down? That's fine. That's fine then. Okay, and yeah, I've read them. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay. It's recommended that we note the contents of this report. So can I take it that is noted? Okay. Thank you. Right, item 6, we now move on to the audit results report 23-24, and this is Simon and Simon Mathis. Yes, okay, sorry Simon, I missed you there. Right, would you like to just talk us through this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So moving at short order from 22-23 to 23-24, the report that you have in front of you is our audit results report, which sets out the findings from our work in the 23-24 year. Our work in 23-24 very much needs to be viewed in the wider context of the current reforms to reset and recover the local audit market, so to address the pervasive backlog in local government audit. And as we've just heard, the opinion on the 22-23 financial statements was disclaimed in accordance with those measures to reset the audit market, and we set out our findings in our 5th of November audit completion report. So, as set out in the covering letter and executive summary of the report that you have in front of you, we do intend to issue a disclaimer again on the 23-24 financial statements. I need to be very clear, that is solely because we issued a disclaimer in 22-23. The issue of that disclaimer means we don't have assurance in relation to brought forward balances. Therefore, we don't have assurance on prior year comparatives in the 23-24 statements. We don't have assurance over some movements, and we don't have assurance over some closing balances in 23-24. The issue of a disclaimer in 23-24, and indeed there will be another 4 years to fully recover the system, is consistent with the National Audit Office guidance and Financial Reporting Council guidance that's been published on reset and recovery. Having said all of that, I think I need to be clear that we have undertaken a virtually full programme of work in 23-24, so I think the committee can take a large degree of assurance from the report that you have in front of you and the findings in that report. Within the report, we set out at Appendix A, which is on page 49, a summary of the assurance that we have gained in the 23-24 year. You'll see from that there are a large number of areas where we have substantial, i.e. full, assurance that have been unaffected by the reset and recovery measures and the prior disclaimer. There are some areas where we only have partial assurance. There's a small number of areas where we can offer no assurance. Our value for money for work continues to be unaffected by the measures to reset and recover the local audit, and we report our final results on value for money in this report. So just to confirm that we have identified no risks of significant weaknesses in the Council's value for money arrangements and no actual significant weaknesses in the Council's value for money arrangements. We'd also very much like to thank the finance team at the Council. So we've had a really good cooperative approach to the audit, and if we're going to recover local audit now, we absolutely need that. So we'd like to extend our thanks to Alan, Lisa and his team for the way that they've engaged with us and responded to queries. And if we are going to recover, we absolutely need that going forward. And that has allowed us to deliver pretty much a full programme of work in the year. There are 2 points in the report that I would specifically draw to your attention. So we raise a control reconciliation on page 37 around listings being available to fully support debtor and creditor balances. And then we talk about the Council's approach to recharges on page 44. Those are areas where we think we can continue to work going forward to improve efficiency and improve arrangements for the production of the financial statements, and then arrangements for delivery of the audit. Hence, we raise them in the report. I will stop there in terms of the overall context, but I'll pass over to Katie, who will take you through the detailed findings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So just to touch on a bit more of the detail contained within the report. So page 19 contains details of the audit differences that we've identified. Of those differences, all of those we expect to be adjusted in the financial statements, with the exception of the one for 224,000 relating to investment property valuations. Within section 2 of our report, which starts from page 22, we set out our work performed on the areas of audit focus. So you'll see that there's a couple of areas there that are still ongoing, one of which is our audit work on the risk of misstatement due to fraud or error. But we have, however, completed our testing on PPE and investment property additions. That's in accordance with our risk of inappropriate capitalisation of revenue expenditure. Within that risk, though, the work on REFCUS, which is revenue expenditure funded by capital under statute, and journals remains ongoing. We have completed all of our testing on investment property valuations, property, plant and equipment valuations, which includes those valued on a depreciated replacement cost basis and on an existing use value basis. And that also includes our work on council dwelling valuations. So some misstatements have been identified in these areas, and they are detailed on pages 26 through to 28. Just to highlight the work that we've done on the pension liability valuation, which is included on page 30 of the report. We've employed the services of our EY pension specialist to review the council's IAS 19 reports. That's consistent with previous years. But as a result of this work, we identified a misstatement within some of the assumptions that had been adopted by the actuary. So the council did have to request a further IAS 19 report. That was received by the council on the 13th of December. So we're currently working our way through this. But we have noted a difference of approximately £7 million between the original and updated liability. Just moving on to pages 40 and 41 of the pack. I'd just like to highlight a further recommendation with regards to the implementation of the new accounting standard IFRS 16, which relates to leases. That is effective from the 1st of April 2024. But at the point of undertaking our audit work, the council hadn't yet assessed the impact of that standard on their financial statements. So our recommendation there is just that that rate of progress be accelerated. And finally, just to touch on Appendix C, which is included on page 55. So this just lists out our areas of audit work that are ongoing. They remain ongoing as of today, but we do have resource in place over the coming days and weeks just to work on those, with our focus being on prioritising the balance sheet accounts that are listed there as still being outstanding. That was all I was going to cover, but we welcome any questions.
Thank you. I think before we have questions from members, I'll just ask if Alan or Paul want to comment on any of those.
Just very briefly for me, Chairman, I think it is pleasing that we have had a very thorough audit undertaken for 23-4, especially in the context of the limited piece that was undertaken for 22-3. I think that the disclaimed opinion was obviously a bit frustrating, but understandable, because obviously if there's no assurance of balances brought forward, it's really difficult to get to a position where you can give the absolute assurance. But I hope that catches itself up quite quickly, and that we don't find ourselves in this kind of ongoing cycle. I mean, in terms of the unadjusted difference, yeah, it's fairly typical that we have a valuation difference within this particular type of properties. Typically, because it's based on a judgment, it's not right or wrong. We then support the judgment of our valuer, typically, especially in light of it being immaterial to the overall accounts. So that's why we take a view that it's something that we don't need to adjust for. As you see through the report, though, everything else that was picked up, if it was in error, and obviously the pension one was a bit of a frustration for us, having had to go to get a revised IS report quite late on, but again, got the report, reflected, updated the figures, and everything's been updated and adjusted accordingly. So yeah, quite pleased with how the process has run this year.
Okay, there were one or two items that I wondered if you could just quickly comment on, and that is, for example, just an example, they raised this question of financial reporting standard IFRS 16 leases. Is this something that we have in hand?
It is, yeah. So as Simon says, it comes into effect from the 1st of April 2024. So that's this year's accounts. So
right,
when it comes
okay.
to year end this year, it will obviously be based on the new IFRS 16 standard. Yes, there is probably some work we could have done in advance of that and got maybe ourselves slightly ahead of the game. But actually, as it happens, we're quite confident that we'll get it right for 24-5, which is when the new standard takes effect.
Okay, thank you. Right, anyone got any questions? Yes, Councillor Davis.
Again, it's on the valuation differences and the disparities between that. This is obviously something that's happened before as well. I think I've been here before where we've had the same issue in previous audits. And is there any way we can reduce the risk of it happening again, or is it just a case of we will come up with our figures and they will always be different to what the auditors say? Also, with one of the 698k understatement is on one asset. Do you know what asset, or you know, it must be quite a large asset, I'd imagine, because it's quite a large understatement. And in terms of revaluation, what is the council going to do going forward to make sure that it's always keeping up to date with its own accounting policies?
Yeah.
So in terms of the asset that was understated, those are council beach huts. The reason for that is that the asset should have been subject to a full revaluation under the rolling valuation approach that's undertaken by the council. So there's a cyclical approach over a 5-year window, which is allowable. It wasn't picked up that it was due for revaluation, so it was just subject to an impairment review. It wasn't properly revalued at all. So it's just an oversight in relation to Beechwood assets. It's not indicative of a more pervasive problem, I would suggest.
Okay, Councillor Sullivan.
Sorry, it's still on the same subject. In the report, it says due to incorrect determination. Is it incorrect or is it determination of the auditors? So is the phrasing correct?
So where we flag a difference as judgmental, and we say that specifically in relation to one of the differences, we're recognising that it's inherently an accounting estimate and there is a degree of subjectivity applied. For things like the beach huts, where it just wasn't revalued, that was a mistake.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grisell.
Chair. With regard to the closing balances, is there any more information that you can give on that? Is it necessarily because of the staffing issue, or was there another problem? It just seems strange that you can't get closing balances in time.
So if this is in relation to the reset and the impact of that, so we can't give you assurance as things stand at the moment in relation to reserves. That's because we don't have any assurance over the brought forward reserve position because we disclaimed the audit last year. So we don't know where you start. We can audit the movements in the year, but we can't give you assurance over where you finish. So if that's the question being asked, that's the case across every council, not just here. So every council where we have disclaimed prior, and other audit providers have disclaimed prior year audit opinions under the reset arrangements, that's the situation in respect of closing reserves. So it's in no way specific to this authority.
Thank you.
Councillor Young, I think you put your hand up first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to officers and to Anthony Young for the work you've done here. I'm curious with regards to the disclaimer process. You spoke about National Audit Office guidelines there and the sort of the hangover effect of that. Is that something which the council can correct, or is that something that has to go through a period of time to work through?
That has to go through a period of time to work through, and it's the same for all councils, and pretty much all councils have been impacted by this. So it will not fully unwind until the financial year 26-27. So over time, we'll move from a disclaimer to a modified opinion, but the first time that an unqualified opinion can be given, all things being equal, of course, that we're able to, is 26-27. So there's local audit recovery implementation guidance that's freely available on the National Audit Office's website. That sets out all of that. The Financial Reporting Council have also issued a number of publications that set out that timeline. So it's commonly accepted and it's consistent across councils.
Councillor Sullivan.
You'll have caught up with the 23-24 and get that out by the 28th of February. What's your foresight for the 24-25?
If only I had a crystal ball, councillor. So, as we've said, the audit here has run well in the context of the reset in 23-24. So we're able to sit here today and tell you that we've undertaken virtually a full programme of work in 23-24. I expect that to be the case again in 24-25. Because we've done some limited work to start to rebuild assurance this year, we will be able to give you, all things being equal, touch wood, everything goes okay, a little bit more next year. But we're still not going to be in the position of, as I've just said, being able to give an unqualified opinion until 26-27 at the earliest. It's not a position that I think anybody feels comfortable about, but it's where the national system is.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rackman.
So it's just about the pensions issue. Have you got a time scale for how long that's going to take to sort through?
So it's sorted now. So it's an issue that's impacted all of the scheduled bodies in Hampshire. So there was a mistake made by the actuary in the production of the IS19 results reports for all of the scheduled bodies in Hampshire. So all of the lower tier authorities that are within the fund, and indeed the upper tier authorities that are within Hampshire Pension Fund. It's something that was detected we have our own specialist actuaries that look at the work of the pension fund actuaries in producing the reports. The pension fund actuary has put its hand up and said, yes, that was our error. Revised reports have been run. We've got the revised report, or the council's requested that. We've run that back through our pensions people. We're now content with it. The statements will be updated to reflect the revised valuation, and that's all in hand.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
So on the, I assume the beach huts one's the Milford beach huts, probably. On the, it's more a case of terminology. EUV, is that existing use value? And DRC, what's that?
That's depreciated replacement cost. So that's for specialist assets for which there's no active market. So there's no comparable evidence for what they could sell for.
Okay, so could you explain a bit more about how that kind of works in terms of, I don't know what the asset's relating to, so I don't really can't work it out in my mind.
Yeah, so that's specialised assets. So your likes of that would be like your leisure centres. They're the big ones that get valued under a depreciated replacement cost, because you can't compare the price of a leisure centre because there are no, very, very limited active sales of leisure centres. So you do it based on how much it would cost to build.
The way that works is what would it cost to build a replacement asset? So not what is this asset worth in a wider market, because by definition there is no market that you can gauge it against. So it's what would it cost to replace the asset at a modern equivalent. So if you were to build that again, if it were to be destroyed overnight, what would it cost you to replace it? There are also some subjective judgments in there whether as to around you'd replace it at the same size, would you put it in the same place? All of those sorts of questions are considered in a DRC valuation.
Well, that sends my nerd brain tingling, because that's really interesting, actually. Obviously, we've got local government reorganisation. I'm not going to ask you about that. But obviously, we are looking at the first assured, effectively, if we can get it, assured opinion just as we're about to be abolished, which is slightly ironic. But are you relatively confident that that 26-27 date will be reached? Because it might be a case of, if it isn't, then we won't actually exist by the time we might get an assured opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then, but if everything were to go according to plan and we rebuild the assurance as we expect to, and what I am telling you is based on this year, we've had the kind of approach from the council that we need to be able to rebuild the assurance. We are in a position where we could give an unmodified opinion by 26-27. It'd be speculative to say any more.
Yeah, okay. I think this is a bit, in the future, isn't it? We don't really know what's going to happen, so I think we'll leave it like that. Okay, the recommendation is that we note this report, so I think we can say we've given it a thorough kicking, so thanks very much. Right. We move on then to item 7 on the agenda, which is the draft final annual report for 23-24. And I'm going to ask Paul or Alan to speak on this. Paul?
Chair, so yeah, further to the previous agenda item, this requests delegation again for yourself and the Section 151 officer to formally sign off the accounts when concluded, and also approval for the annual governance statement to be signed by the lead and the chief executive. So a similar process to what was needed for the 22-23 audit is being repeated this case. So all those adjustments just mentioned will be enacted, and we shall be in good order for the 28th of February backstop date. Thank you.
Okay, just to clarify, I mean, we're still saying that the audit is going to be complete by the end of next month. Is that's really it? And what the proposal is, instead of, because there are a lot of items on this agenda that have to be done in January, we don't want another meeting in February just to do that. So you're asking that we delegate authority to approve this at the end of February without holding a formal meeting.
Exactly
Is that
Chair.
correct? Is
Exactly
it?
that, Chair. The next meeting, unfortunately, is in March, which would be beyond the backstop date. So in order to meet the deadlines, delegation is being sought,
Okay.
rather than another meeting be convened.
Right. Anyone got any questions on this? Are you all happy with doing this? Yeah, no questions. Okay then, thank you. So we take it that item 1, section 151, officers going to have the authority to review and consider it and be delegated authority to approve it. The annual governance statement, which goes to the chief executive and the leader. Are we happy with that? Okay, then I think we can take that as all agreed, Andy. Okay, thank you very much. Right, we come on to item 8, which is the internal audit progress report, and Anthony's going to give us a run through on this. Thank you. Over to Anthony Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. So this provides our usual progress update in relation to the 24-25 internal audit plan. Hopefully it's a format that you're now familiar with, but obviously more than happy to explain any areas as needed. Just to highlight a couple of areas. So as reflected on agenda page 205 of your pack, at the time of writing, which was at the end of December, we were 36% complete through the audit work, which is getting reports through to at least draft report stage, with a little over half still in progress and a few audits that were at the time still yet to commence. But we had those lined up for progressing during Q4. Page 206 to 207 of your agenda pack reflects where the New Forest management team are in terms of implementing actions that have arisen out of previous audit reviews. There are 3 areas highlighted in bold, which reflects that all actions have been confirmed as completed in those areas now. And for those where there are overdues actions, where updates have been received, that's been provided for you on page 207 from the management team. Moving forward to agenda page 209 to 10, there was one review that we need to bring to your attention that since the previous progress report concluded with a limited assurance opinion in and around risk management. Now, we'll refer you that a lot of the issues that were identified through the report will ironically be addressed once you go through agenda item 12. So just to give you a very quick whistle stop with the findings, it's twofold really, that the risk management policy as it was didn't quite reflect some of the practices that were in place, and we felt as well that there are areas where the risk management policy could be improved and enhanced to help officers. That we obviously confirm that you do receive regular risk updates, which is positive, and in and around the escalations of new or significant risks. But one of the biggest findings from the review was at the time, a lot of your service risk registers were not in place and there wasn't a formal timetable to sort of really drive these areas forward. But I'm pleased to report that in the process of finalising this report, 6 of the 14 actions have already been confirmed as complete. We've already seen evidence of the service risk registers now being in place as part of our planning for the next audit cycle. And as I say, a lot of the other remaining actions should be addressed upon approval of the new risk management policy going forward. The remainder of the report just shows where we are in terms of delivering each of the individual reviews. So you'll note that Some are at the earlier stages, just where they were lining them up for Q4 or had previously been scoped and work is now underway. There has been quite a bit of movement since this report has been issued in terms of work that was already been complete, that reports have now been issued, and we remain confident that the vast bulk of the work, if not all, will be completed by the end of the financial year, and we do have the resources in place to deliver that work. Final point to note that there have been 4 proposed variations to the audit plan that are shown for you on agenda pages 214 and 15, by and large, where since the plan was put together, things have moved on, and either there's projects underway to significantly assess certain areas that's going to be undertaken by the in-house team. So us doing the same piece of work at that point in time is only going to duplicate work that's already in place. Or where an external body is now going to be brought in to do that work instead, and we'll look to the outcomes of that work and pick it up at a later stage once any resulting action's been implemented. So I'll pause there, Chair. I'm more than happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Anyone got questions? Yes, Councillor.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I know through the report it says nationally there are a shortage of auditors, and presumably we are short of auditors here as well. Are we trying to address that, or are we where we are and can't do anything about it?
I think there's 2 separate issues. There's the national shortage of external auditors that Simon's already talked through quite considerably. In terms of internal auditors, yes, there is a national shortage as well. Within our control, and I think we've explained to previous committees, we do have a plan to try and address that issue, but what we can't do is conjure up what isn't there. So essentially we're looking to develop our own staff and train them up, but it does take quite a while. Fortunately, with remote working, we can cast the net a lot wider and employ people from a wider geographical area than we would have been able to do several years ago, but that's not without its own challenges as well. So I'm getting lots of messages through on my Teams channel, which is very annoying. Sorry if you keep picking these up. I wasn't realised I was connected to Wi-Fi. But yeah, we're doing everything we can to address that issue.
Okay.
But we can only control what we can control.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yes, so you've got a section saying audit reviews removed from the plan, excluded from the rolling work programme. Asset management, corporate estate is one of them, with the MACE review obviously being what was proposed. Now with the intended changes due to local government reorganisation, that asset review needs to be looked at again. Does that increase the risk to the council, therefore, that perhaps this won't be done in time and you won't be able to effectively review the asset management? It's about risk management and the asset review and how that plays into your own schedule.
Yeah, if I can just comment on that initially, just to confirm. So we have committed now to undertaking a fuller strategic review of our assets. So that will emanate in a asset strategy, as we covered in the resources transformation panel yesterday. So at the time that that's presented, produced, agreed on, that would be the right time then for internal audit to potentially come in and have a role to play in terms of, I suppose, getting into the weeds then of is that the right strategy? Do we then have the ability to deliver and see through, etc.? So yeah, it's just a restock of timing really. So there will still be an audit undertaken. It's just post the strategy.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, I thought that might be the case, but do we have a timescale for that at the moment?
So we haven't yet conducted our review for the 25/6 audit programme, but I would very strongly expect in that conversation that we would have something in around asset management within the 25/6 audit plan.
Okay. I have one question, and that is on the live audit reviews and the overdue housing rent reconciliations, where there seem to be 5 items red on your chart. This is on page 206. And you say under the explanation here, housing rent reconciliations, the team are actively working with the supplier. I mean, what supplier is this? This is on page 207, last paragraph.
Yeah, so that would be our basically our rent reconciliation system that we use.
Sorry, say that again.
So it'll be the system, the software.
Oh, it's software
Yeah,
supplier.
that's it. So there's essentially there's an issue in terms of reconciliation and in terms of what's in the software as opposed to what's sort of presented in the ledger, if you like. And that was brought through in terms of the internal audit review. But as you say, there's commitment there to look to very much address this before the end of the financial year. So we'll be square.
That's by the end of
Exactly.
this year.
Yeah, that's it. End of this financial year. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Davies.
Thank you. Funny enough, going back to that, and it was something I was going to raise and got sidetracked earlier. Open spaces and playground safety checks and engineering works are consistently seem to be come up in audit as areas of concern. We ask this, I think, every year, but we can only ask so much when it doesn't seem to be taken on board, or at least it is taken on board, but are there critical failures in those areas that prevent decent assurance ever being given? Because it always seems to be a case of every year it's a limited or reasonable assurance. And I was wondering if that's something that you can answer.
So those audit areas are still appearing there because the actions that were agreed when we last did that audit review haven't yet still been completed. So until those actions have been completed, we'll then still reflect that within the progress reports. It's not that we've gone back and we've re-looked at those areas several times and it's still limited. It's just that was the finding at the time, and the issues there still haven't been resolved. Just to remind you back with, for example, the open spaces and playground safety checks, at the time of the review, there was no concern over the work that was being undertaken, but based upon the information that was there, we couldn't give the full assurance that everything was being done on a timely basis because that information didn't exist. So it was very much more in and around how the work of the team was being managed and how it was being reported upon and the level of confidence that we could give over that, rather than your playgrounds and open spaces, for argument's sake, weren't being inspected. But with incomplete information, we couldn't give you that assurance. We are still getting the assurances that the playgrounds, for argument's sake, are being inspected on a regular basis, but some of those underlying system issues are still being worked through and resolved, as I understand it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, do you think that'll be done this financial year?
Again, it's down to the council's management team to address those issues and take those actions forward. I've no control over that.
Well,
perhaps Alan can.
Do you want to comment on that?
I was going to say, I think, as you know, we have to essentially go through quite a reprioritisation exercise at this point in time. So yes, as much as there was some degree of management actions, there were a couple of high priority management actions off this particular audit. Does that take absolute priority over other ICT systems and updates that we need to do at this time? So that's the kind of wider context that we need to consider this in, because obviously we only have so much resource within ICT. There's a real drive still to want to do quite significant work with our modernising our customer-facing services. So does a relatively small back office recording system take priority over that? That's kind of where we are in terms of weighing these things up. But I think where we can take some kind of degree of satisfaction, I suppose, is that in both instances, the majority of actions have been complete. There are just a smaller number now that are still outstanding. So yes, we still need to review and understand why they're outstanding, but I can't sit here and say that they would be absolutely prioritised above other work at this point.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Sullivan.
Going to the MACE report, one of the recommendations was that all the assets should be collated into perhaps one piece of software. And I would think with things looking forward on the next year or two, I would have thought knowing where all our assets are and how much they are worth will be done. Is that the case? And would you be looking at that next year as what you would expect?
Yeah, so we are very much looking at a single software solution for all of our assets. So as much as we have, we have essentially our housing asset database and system. We then have our general fund asset database and system. So, it would be great as a solution to just have an overarching singular asset management system. So that is what we're currently looking at. And that very much through the transformation lens as well. Because as you say, it's going to be really important for us to have a really good understanding of exactly what we own, where it is, which we do, but it's just a little bit fragmented at the moment across two systems. So yeah, very much looking at bringing them together. Yeah.
Is there somebody taking responsibility for the whole thing?
If we think back to the MACE report and its recommendation, it talked about the potential to consider this kind of corporate landlord function. That's not now something we're likely to progress with on the basis that that's quite significant organisational change, and it doesn't feel right to do that and then potentially have that unpicked quite quickly thereafter. Now with that local government reorganisation lens through. So we are still very much a case where we have, our housing revenue account over here, and then we have our corporate asset database over here. So it's not going to be managed by a single department team. However, if we can bring those two together through software, there's going to be a closer working relationship between the two going forward.
Okay, thank you. I've just got one question, Anthony, please, and that's on the performance dashboard on page 205. We're saying that at the moment you are 36% complete, with 52% work in progress. Are we going to complete this by the end of the financial year?
I would still, as I previously assured the committee, remain confident that the significant proportion, if not all of the proposed plan, will be delivered in time for the opinion.
Okay.
We never work on a straight April
No.
March basis. I think it's generally more sort of June to the end of May, or depending on the time when the next committee is. But I still remain absolutely confident at this point in time that the significant proportion, if not all of the plan, will be delivered.
Thank you.
Last year, as you will remember, was a particularly challenging year, and we found 80%, just over 80%, in the end, three different reasons that were discussed at the time. So it has got heavier onus this year. It has got the plan a lot bigger, but again, that work is progressing very well. We've got a lot of audits that were field work at the time of reporting. Some of those have now come into reporting stage. I'm aware of several wins, and the work that is lined up for going forward. We've got the agreed time scales at this stage for those ones that with those reviews
Okay, thank you. Well, yeah. Okay, so, all right. Thank you very much. Has anyone got any other questions? Okay, thank you. In which case, I think we just note this update. Okay, everyone happy? Right, okay, it's item 8. So we now come to item 9, which again is, I think, is you again, Anthony?
Thank you, Chairman. It is me indeed. So this has been my life for about the last several months, and it's caused us quite a headache. However, what I'll do is just give you an overview of quite a significant change that's coming to us from the 1st of April. So throughout the last 12 years, as an internal audit provider, we've been required to comply with the public sector internal audit standards that were based on the IIA's International Professional Practice Framework. Now, the IIA in January 24 made a significant revision to the IPPF and introduced the Global Internal Audit Standards. So this applies to all internal audit providers across the whole globe. And they're set to come into force. They've already come in for the private sector, and they're set to come into force for us from the 1st of April 2025. Now, in one way, the Global Internal Audit Standards are very, very familiar to what we've previously had, arranged quite differently, but they're very, very familiar. But it has introduced quite a few newer requirements, which are outlined for you in section 5 of the report on agenda page 118. But they have also introduced a lot more prescription in certain areas as well. And I think it's some of those areas of prescription that's given us a little bit more of a headache than previously. But fortunately, where we went a lot further than we needed to under the previous standards, I think a lot of those measures were already in place for us. Now, where they're global standards, they are applicable to both the public and the private sector. However, as always, there's a recognition that a lot of the governance arrangements that the standards can't take into account actually come from UK legislation. So to bridge those gaps, there's been a couple of consultation documents. The first is the application note of the Global Internal Audit Standards in the UK public sector. That consultation was in October. We've now had the results of that consultation, and the final document has been published, and some of the additional requirements are shown for you in paragraph 11 on agenda page 219. The second consultation has actually been a little bit more wide-ranging and more useful, which is the Code of Practice for the Governance of Internal Audit in the UK local government. Again, the consultation has been undertaken, but we haven't seen the outcomes of that yet. And where these do need to come into place from the 1st of April, what we've done is done a gap analysis and identified all of the areas that we think need to be in place in order for us to fully meet the requirements from the 1st of April. But until we've seen the final documents, we are a little bit in limbo, but we'll need to react accordingly. So some of the key differences, especially with the codes of practice and the application note, is where they're global standards. Within the private sector, for argument's sake, there isn't necessarily a requirement to have an internal audit function, whereas there is a requirement under UK legislation. But the standards can't take that into account. So in the private sector, what's called the mandate or the remit of the internal audit function comes from the board, that's those charged with governance. Within the UK, it's yourselves as the audit committee that are charged with governance, but you can't influence what we do over and above what legislation says. So it's some of these strange nuances that a lot of these consultations are trying to sort of square. So I think probably just to conclude, one of the main areas that have come in that does give a lot more and greater prescription is some of the consultations that need to take place and some of the reporting that would need to come through to yourselves. So this is really sort of summarised for you in the conclusion, where in order to meet the standards, there's some areas that we do need to consult on, both with the senior management team and with yourselves as the audit committee. So what we will be doing in order to meet that is during January and February, we will be writing out to yourselves to gather your views on something that we've not needed previously, which is an internal audit strategy. Once we have an agreed internal audit strategy that will need to be common across all of our 35 partners rather than our 35 individual strategies, what we'll then do is then develop the performance measures, which will then show how we are going to be measuring and monitoring the implementation of that strategy. But until we've got an agreed strategy, we can't have the corresponding performance measures. So there will be some consultations that will be coming out to yourselves over the next few months. What we're proposing to do is essentially come up with 7 themes and ask for members to rank what they think are going to be the highest through to the lowest priorities, and with the general consensus on the, for example, the 3 or 4 biggest themes, we'll then look to incorporate that within our strategy. There are some other areas of prescription as well. So previously we were required to report on the outcomes of our external quality assessment that we need to have once every 5 years. That's still a requirement. Previously, we've been required to do an annual self-assessment each year, and that's just essentially formed as a one-liner within the progress reports and the annual reports and opinions that we've done that self-assessment and we're still compliant. Going forward, we'll need to bring a full report to you each year on that as well, so you can look forward to those.
Yeah,
So I'll stop there, Chair, but more than happy to take any questions as best I'm able to answer them at this stage.
Anyone got any questions on this? I mean, when you say you're going to consult with us, is this going to be sort of on an individual, you'll send out an email to individual councillors and ask them to, that's probably the best way of doing it, isn't it?
That's exactly the approach we'll be taking.
Okay.
So for those members that have been on the committee for a while, you'll remember that each year we do an annual survey.
Yeah.
So where we can incorporate certain elements into that annual survey, we will do, but there will be some extra consultations that we're hoping is just going to be a really easy web form. We're currently testing it at the moment, but it's just going to be a nice, easy web form that you can just sort of click on the link and fill out those details. So if you do receive a request, please, it isn't spam, but we will let you know that it is going to be genuine, so you know you're not clicking on a malicious link.
Okay, thank you. We're asked, sorry?
Just ask one, Chris.
Yes.
In fact, reading it earlier, I possibly got the wrong end of the stick. I think not. But on page 220, item 15, it looked as though, in fact, you were taking away our powers and looking as though you were looking for statutory confirmation. No. That's how it read.
Sorry, no, that's not the case. It's really within the global standards. It's aimed a lot more to the private sector than the UK sector. So within there, the mandate comes from the board or those charged with governance. But within the UK, that's dictated through in legislation. So it's just to sort of square those differences. We're not looking to take any powers away from yourselves at all.
Okay, thank you. So we're just asked to note this overview. Happy to note? Okay, thank you. Right, we come now to item 10, Treasury Management Strategy. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Nice to see you all this morning. So this is the authority's Treasury Management Strategy, and we're asking you this morning that you recommend this to full council for approval. From our point of view, in managing the authority's cash balances and borrowing requirements, this is really important because it sets the parameters that we'll operate for you in managing those things in the coming year. Just as sort of background in the context of what we're doing over the last decade, we're in a period of still relatively high interest rates, although we do expect those to be falling in the coming year, although perhaps not as fast as have been predicted at certain points in the recent past. As set out in Table 2, looking at the Council's overall financial position, we're entering into a period where the Council does expect to need to borrow externally to continue to finance its full plans for capital expenditure. We set out in the report the approach that we'll do that with a number of options, although first and foremost, the assumption is that any new borrowing will come from the Public Works Loan Board, PWLB, but any new borrowing will continue to be a tripartite decision, or sorry, not decision, but sort of working between ourselves, your advisors, Arlen Close, and the finance team here, with obviously Alan having the final decision. Although we're entering a period of borrowing there'll still be day-to-day cash balances to be managed, and therefore we've set out the normal range and approach to the management of investments. And just as a reminder, our priorities for investing are security of those balances, making sure what's invested comes back fully, liquidity, so making sure cash is available, and that's clearly an increasing priority when balances are falling and we're into a position of looking to need to borrow. And then finally, in that order, is then looking to earn the most return we can do for any money that's invested. So the report, as I say, sets out our options and the limits we expect to operate into when making investment decisions on your behalf. And I'll stop there, Chairman, and happily take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to ask a quick one before everybody else jumps in. I mean, this strategy is up to 28. I mean, is this... would you like to comment on that as to whether that is realistic that we...
To be honest, I think probably almost everyone else in this room is probably better informed about what the future may hold to the extent that we know. I think all that we can do is make the best decisions that are most appropriate with the money that we're charged with managing for on your behalf.
Assuming that things are going to carry on as they are, that's, I suppose...
Yes, I think if anything changed and we had more concrete plans, and I'm sure that will happen at a certain point, then that might change the equation, and therefore we might make certain decisions with a view of a wider perspective, but we just don't have that at the moment. So from our point of view, we continue with normal. Alan may have...
Yeah, no, I just reaffirm that. So everything we're doing still at the moment is based on business as usual. You know, it's the district council is a going concern at this time. There are no firm plans in place that says anything different at this point. So, you know, even our medium-term financial planning, still working on a 4-year cycle, because we don't know yet with any surety that that's not going to be the case. So, yeah, it's absolutely right that we still manage on a continual basis for this kind of strategy at this point. Thank you.
Right, anyone? Yes, Councillor Sullivan.
The money we get from the Public Works Loan Board, does that go into the Treasury Management? Because the Public Works Loan Board says you can't invest. But if it's in the Treasury Management, you are investing.
No, because essentially our loans are there on the basis of our capital projects expenditure. So it's mainly within our housing revenue account programme. So, for example, where we've just entered contract with, I don't know, the old A&T site in New Milton, you know, we are going to start paying bills for that. So therefore, that's the borrowing is paying essentially those invoices and those bills. Yeah, that's it. So it's not that we borrow to then invest. You borrow because you're having to pay, you know, particular invoices and particular projects.
Yes, Councillor Richards.
I'm looking at table 1, which is the alternative strategies and their implications, which is on page 231 of the pack. One of the alternatives is to reduce the level of borrowing, so the impact would be the saving on debt interest is likely to exceed lost investment income, which sounds good. And the impact on risk management is that reduced investment balance leading to a lower impact in the event of a default, which also sounds good. So why would we not reduce our level of borrowing?
Yeah, it aligns back to the council's clear corporate plan priority. So the council's had an aspiration to build more council homes, more properties. So that's what's driving the capital expenditure. That then needs to be financed through external borrowing. So obviously a decision taken to not have borrowing means we can't then continue to invest in the acquisition and development of homes. So we're facilitating that corporate priority through taking on the borrowing.
Yes, Councillor Sullivan.
Well, political question, anything else, I suppose. If the government wants us to build 1,500 houses a year, who's paying for them, to build them?
Yeah, so the government they've put in already a couple of incentives. So, for example, you can get a 40 basis point reduction on your PWLB borrowing if you're borrowing for the purpose of providing affordable social homes as a local authority. So they're already starting to try and incentivise, but I think the government recognised that in the context of also decarbonisation and significant retrofitting costs, if they want us to do that and build, that actually they need to be more generous in terms of grant and in terms of support to make that happen. There's nothing concrete yet, but I very much see that there'll be something coming.
Councillor Davis.
Again, this is almost a policy question, but is it from a kind of treasury management perspective, is it better for the council to be building itself or just simply buying off the open market houses in terms of treasury management?
I don't think it really makes much difference in terms of treasury management. I think our housing development team here have open opportunities. You know, we're quite active still in, say, the Section 106 market. You know, that's quite good for us because actually those properties tend to be fairly a little bit cheaper, for example. As you know, we've also acquired bare land sites and then gone through the effort of contracting and tendering and then awarding and building ourselves. So, you know, very much if we want to meet that 600 as an aspiration, we've got to have all opportunities open to us. And at the end of the day, either option come at a cost, which then needs to be supported through the treasury management strategy. So it doesn't make a lot of difference. We'd just limit ourselves if we said actually we were only going to purchase as opposed to purchase and build.
Mr. Councillor Richards.
Okay, so I'm just interested in section 1.49 of the report, which talks about the council's pooled fund investments and the unrealised capital loss this year, 0.7 million. And it says that from this next financial year, those unrealised losses or gains need to be incorporated into the revenue account. Is that going to cause a big problem for producing a balanced budget if you've got, you know, 0.7 million pounds, which you essentially have no control over?
Yes, is the very short answer. You know, it's a real frustration, and you know, as practitioners, I suppose that's where we have a slightly different view on why we need to do this. At the end of the day, it's unrealised. So you know, we still believe that the override in terms of not seeing that through your revenue account is the right approach, because ultimately you only realise that loss at the point that you look to sell that investment. You know, so it is something we need to consider. I mean, that is something that is a reason why we've set up essentially a reserve for that purpose. So we haven't got the full balance of the current uncrystallised loss in that reserve balance, but it will help. But then there's no intention for us at this point to sell those particular pooled investments within the next 12 to 24 months anyway. So yeah, it is a frustrating one, something that we need to be mindful of, certainly.
Yeah, Councillor Davis.
On the table 3, which is the commercial property, obviously it looks like it's not doing so well. Could you explain a bit more about the issues there with the losses and how that's come about and whether we can expect further losses or gains this year?
Sorry, Councillor, which page
Sorry,
are you referring to?
I think you're at the next item. I think.
Oh, the next item. I've got ahead of you, don't worry. We'll do that one.
I'm all in favour of moving quickly. Is there any other question on this particular paper? Right, okay, I think we're asked to recommend to full council that this strategy is accepted and authority is delegated to the Section 151 officer to continue for Hampshire County Council to continue to manage the investments. Everyone happy with that? Okay, thank you. So we now come on to the investment strategy. It's item 11. And I think who's going to talk on this? This is Paul.
Yes,
Okay,
Chair.
and then you can come up with your question. Right.
Thank you, Chair. So following statutory government guidance, this strategy effectively covers how the council manages its surplus cash and its investments. An important strand of this is the treasury management, which we have just substantially discussed. However, it's worth reminding members that cash balances are forecast to decrease and our need to borrow is going to grow, which will impact slightly the opportunities and scale to which we can make treasury investments, notwithstanding the day-to-day management that's required. The second aspect is our commercial and property investment strategy. And whilst the intent is still to seek opportunities where they are to support economic development and regeneration, this has been effectively paused in recent months and years due to the challenging business cases and regarding payback and margins that we can get from them. But nonetheless, having a strategy in place to enable us to react when appropriate is essential, and the purpose of this paper, which requests Audit Committee to recommend that the strategy is approved and adopted by Council.
Right, Councillor Davis.
So it is on table 3, and we got there eventually, thank you. On the Platinum Jubilee Business Park, obviously that's quite a recent big project that's been done by this council, but it appears to be a loss of value so far. Is that just asset depreciation, or what's the situation there?
So the most significant one there is the Platinum Jubilee assets, which was previously valued at cost during construction, and then at this point, March 24, was valued at the market value, and due to the level of occupancy, that had an impact on the valuation that was given. So again, tenants and occupancy are increasing, so we'd expect that to improve in future. And as the previous discussion meant, it's not realised, so we obviously have no intention to sell that in the near future. So it's a book adjustment that was required.
Okay. I'm just going to have a question, because I've only just sort of realised in previous reports, and I don't see it here, we've had it says table 3, commercial property held at generating income, and there's no income figure. Is that somewhere else? Is that in another table somewhere?
It's not elsewhere, Chair. I think it's just to emphasise that these are income-generating assets as opposed to...
That's all. You don't say how much they're generating.
Not on an individual basis, but table 7 of the report.
Table 7?
Gives you the rate of return for those investments.
Okay, so it's purely an overall figure, because in a previous report you had it item by item, and we highlighted a very low return on, I think it was the Platinum Jubilee Business Park, and the answer was because it wasn't actually completely let.
Yes, slightly different report to a different meeting, Chair. So we take the annual overview of our commercial and residential property strategies through the Resources Transformation Overview Scrutiny Panel. So it's that meeting where we typically provide the list of the assets and the income at an asset by asset level. This particular report, we've always tended to summarise and only provide the overall yield.
Okay. It was in the October meeting of Audit Committee, it was highlighted that the rate of return for the Platinum Jubilee Business Park was 1.48.
Again.
So are you saying we have to wait till next October to get an update on that?
Possibly, again, a slight difference between this being a more like an annual strategy report,
right,
as opposed to that one being the more regularised monitoring report.
Okay.
So again, in terms of strategy, higher level. So
yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and in terms of the ongoing monitoring, more detail.
Okay. Are you able to tell us whether the business park is now fully let, or?
My understanding is we're currently around about 70%.
Okay.
So I think we're slightly behind ideally where we would have wanted to be by now, but we're still very much actively marketing. There's still a lot of activity on that site, but yeah, there's still a little way to go before we get full occupancy.
Okay, thank you. Right, anyone? Yes, Councillor Davis.
I just wanted to reassure you, Chairman, that I also initially thought the same thing and then looked back. But yes, I did almost wonder the same thing. So it wasn't just you.
Okay. Right, any other questions? No? Okay, so I think we're on strategy. I think it's we have to recommend to full council that the investment strategy provided be approved. Are we happy to do that? Okay, thank you. Right, we now come on to item 12, which I think is the risk management item. James has arrived. Right, you're going to talk us through this. This is a new presentation.
It is indeed,
New
Chairman.
format.
Thank you, Chairman and members. Good morning. Today, I will present the updates to the risk management policy and explaining the transition from a strategic risk register to a principal risk-based one. Starting off on Appendix 1, page 283 of the report pack, several sections of the risk management policy have been revised. Notably, a new section on risk appetite has been added to page 286, providing valuable insights into the Council's current risk maturity. On the same page, the section for roles and responsibilities has been updated to clarify the specific roles and responsibilities within both the officer and democratic structures concerning risk management. Page 290 of the report pack, section 5 introduces the new risk bow tie analysis, which visually and logically isolates each risk, mapping out relevant consequences and suggested mitigation strategies. Page 291 in section 6, I have enhanced the heat map diagram by including risk scores for each box for easier reference. Section 7 on page 293 remains unchanged, as the options for treating risks have not altered. Page 295, section 8, has been updated to outline the reporting cycles for both service risk registers and principal risk registers. The link between these two registers is crucial, as the service risk registers will help identify areas that may require additional focus. The frequency of reviews will ensure that risks are managed effectively and kept up to date. The principal risk register represents a new approach, moving away from the strategic risk register. This fresh iteration offers a clear and concise insights that are specific to NFDC, removing the generic format that often contained excessive detail, making it difficult to read and understand. Each principal risk has been categorised into the following groups: financial, legal and regulatory, major projects, operations, people and reputation. The risk ratings for the principal risk register reflect the status at the time of this writing, having been thoroughly reviewed and scored to represent the most current position. Similar to the strategic risk register comments, we now have our overview and mitigation narratives, which highlight the commendable work accomplished thus far, as well as areas requiring further action moving forward. The benefit of this reporting style lies in its focus on the highest level risks currently faced by the Council, allowing more frequent updates on risks, adding or removing them as necessary. For instance, while the principal risk associated with the Hardley Depot is immediate, it is not expected to be as long-lasting compared to cyber risks the Council faces currently and into the future. This approach demonstrates our agile methodology in managing the Council's most significant risks. I'd like to thank you for your time and I'll welcome any questions.
Right, anyone? Questions? I mean, it's taken, sorry, John. No.
Up to you. I mean, I was just going to say the major one, I think it's been brought up before, is this elephant in the room, which is the one on actually PR4 on page 301, about the, if you like, the present political thing going on. I mean, this when you have a risk like this, it'll reverberate, of course, into everybody's thinking, including plotting, planning, financial issues. Earlier, we were, for example, talking of something, and as you say, you have to be aware of the risks that are going on. And I'm just wondering how everybody should be using this as a sort of a template in everything they do, I presume.
Absolutely. I mean, it just gives an insight as to showing that we don't shy away from the difficult topics. And I think this highlights that, from the political landscape down to the operational side. So it's an agile document, it's flexible, and I think this current iteration does show that.
Okay, I mean, my comment on it is a radical change from the strategic risk sheet, where I felt that members had the opportunity to input in, specific risks into it. And I just wonder whether that is now still possible. I'm going to just ask one, before Mr. Councillor Davis, I just quickly, under PR6, health and safety, what is that, a health and safety incident? This is so broad, and, I just wonder what use that is to say that a serious health and safety incident. What do you cover by that?
So
give me an example.
So just to explain the rationale behind it, it's a trade-off from having detail on the excessive detail that we had on the strategic risk register. So having this sort of principal approach, you can still have that overarching view on it, but the specifics of incidences will be looked at within the service level risk registers, and those will be monitored. It just feeds up to a more overviewed approach to it, which is what the purpose is of the principal risk approach. In terms of getting updates, you can still feed into this process, through the regular reviews that you'll be getting, but anything that's more granular, you could get from the respective service manager leads, also from the portfolio holders. So there are other avenues of getting that information and obviously it being updated.
Yes, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Hi, under working practices, you've got being an employer of choice, but you've made that a high risk. Why?
It's certainly an issue that finding the right skills for the right people for this organisation can be quite difficult, and it is an ongoing problem throughout other industries. So we're not immune to that, and not having the right people in the right jobs to deliver the services that we're statutory bound to deliver puts us at a high risk. So it just reflects that, really, the position that if we do not do X, Y, and Z and retain staff and attract new talent, we would be in a difficult position. So that's why it's a high risk.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Adams, Vice Chairman, for pointing out PR4 to me, because I happen to disagree on a potential change of leadership might in fact impact services. If anything, services would get better. But I do wonder if that's a little bit out of date. Because with the reorganisation and stuff like that, it's not a case of changing leadership might see decreased support. It's more a case of the actual reorganisation itself will be the issue for risk management. So I don't think it's so much that. Perhaps the emphasis there. I don't like the way that's worded, and I also think it's probably the emphasis should be more on the reorganisation and less on the leadership of the county council. Because I think in terms of service delivery, services in terms of statutory services won't change because they have to be delivered, and there's going to be very little scope for any sort of changes anyway. But it's just I don't like the way that's worded.
Right. Yes, Councillor Richards.
You referred to the service risk registers. Will this committee have oversight of those at all, or will we just be looking at the principal risk register?
You'd be essentially looking at the principal risk register, but if there's anything specific that you have questions around those service risk registers, I'm happy to facilitate those conversations, not a problem.
Yeah, follow on.
I wondered whether you incorporate the concept of positive risk in the principal risk register at all, or is that just not the purpose of it?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite hear you.
Do you incorporate positive risks in the principal risk register? So perhaps referring back to the 5 T's in your report, there's one, the 5th one was taking the opportunity, which might be, you know, a positive risk situation.
Thank you. No, I understand now. I would beg to differ. I'd say, like the Hardley Depot, for example, that's a good opportunity, showing a new facility to be worked at. You know, be new kit there and everything else. So I think there will be opportunities moving forward for risks to come onto that, which would be classed as opportunity risk. But again, because of the business that we're in, it's going to be more heavy weighted towards, I suppose, the not so comfortable areas of risk.
Okay. Anybody else? I don't want to prolong this one. Anyone else got any questions or comments? Right. The recommendation was to offer input prior to presenting it to Cabinet. Well, we've tried to offer some input. Whether it's acceptable, I don't know. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor David.
I was just going to say, personally, I think the PR4 should be a low priority, but that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. I mean, I think, you know, if, you know, unless you debate every one, you know, we could all pick problems with it. I'll be honest, I found the previous register more useful in that, you know, you could input views on risks, and I would like to think that when that first came out, that was a useful thing from this committee, that we did identify certain problems. Anyway, okay, fair enough. We've offered input. Anyone want to say anything else on that? No? Are you going to say something?
I wouldn't mind, Chairman, just in terms of the PR4 and the timeliness. So at the moment, we are simply reflecting. So we know that Hampshire County have asked for deferment of their election from May, but we don't yet know that that's been accepted. So at this point in time, that's why this is still reflected as the risk, because, you know, a change in political leadership at the county in May 2025 could have a bearing on this authority. So that's why it's captured. We don't yet know enough about whether they're going to be included in the devolution priority programme, what the next stages of local government reorganisation are with any clarity. So that's why that's not yet on here. But the idea being that this is quite a fluid document now, it's going to be more regularly updated and reviewed. So we can take the opportunity to reflect on that in a more structured basis going forward. And I think the point you raised, Chairman, in terms of the committee's ability to feed in, what we've tried to do is move away from what we considered as being overly high level. So, for example, in the previous strategic risk register, it was really hard for us to reflect something like our change in waste service. You know, in terms of the potential reputational risk for the council if we get that wrong, there's nothing more significant than that. But yet that didn't have a means to be captured easily on a strategic risk register. So by taking a view of our principal risks, it enables actually that more detailed understanding, even though then we may report slightly less detail per line. So absolutely, this committee still has a role to play, that if we feel like we're not capturing everything that we should in this document, that's exactly the feedback we're looking for and we need in the same way that it was under the strategic risk register. But we just feel as the senior leadership team and officers that this was a lot more meaningful now as a document to an FDC, as opposed to being too high level almost and not really reflecting what we're doing at this point in time. So that was the main driver for the change. Okay. So I just wanted to help clarify that.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, Ken.
Yes, sorry. Again, that's what I was thinking. You'll be looking at this risk register. It all ideas for the future. Because what we're trying to think, we were all saying earlier, because of devolution, how does that affect financial planning, for example? And it is here, but and earlier you said nothing has come forward that you could actually treat as a decision affecting your planning. But the risk is here, but you actually haven't had maybe to put it into practical terms.
It's just a case of timing at this point. So I think in the next iteration of this, we will know more. So in which case, absolutely, we'd be putting something on here at this time. We just feel we don't quite know enough, and it's potentially still 2 to 3 years away. So it's relatively business as usual at this point in time, but fairly soon thereafter, we would be reflecting devolution and local government reorganisation on a version of this within a not too distant future.
Can I ask that when you come back, or James comes back with the rerun of this, that his report highlights what changes have been made since the previous one, which will be easier for us then to track and see what's going on. Did I see a hand go up there, Councillor Davis? No? No. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the recommendation was to offer input, so I think we've done that to an extent. Happy? Yeah? Okay, thank you. Right, we move on to item 13, Audit Committee Work Plan. Yes?
Before we go on that, on the work plan, can we add the risk management to the next meeting? By March, we'll know more about the local government reorganisation, and it might be worth
We've got quite a lot on there already. I don't know.
It's quite a quick agenda item, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's generally quite a quick agenda item.
Yes, I suppose so.
It just might be something worth noting, because obviously by March
because it's work, of course, for officers. I'm going to ask, what's your view on that?
My view, Chairman, is we've just set out in the policy the structured approach in terms of the frequency of bringing that item back to the Audit Committee, which talks about twice yearly, with more regular reporting through the executive management team on a more regular basis than that. So my preference would be then to adopt the position in the policy and stick to that degree of
I think we'll leave it at the 6 month. Okay. So anyone got any other comments on the... Yes, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Just wondering whether the payment card could be dropped to the next month, to the next meeting, because there's quite a longish meeting in March.
Well, the credit card thing, well, you remember the history of this.
Yeah. So it's been going on for years, so going one more couple of months.
I mean, it's a very quick item, isn't it? This.
We'd previously committed to that being an annual report, so we've typically brought that to the March committee. But yeah, I'm not precious about it coming back in March. If you'd rather it defer to June.
Are you suggesting it goes back to the June one? Goes back to June. Well, okay, I don't have a problem.
Perhaps we take a view just in terms of how these reports balance themselves through, and yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? So we got a meeting 21st of March, and then just to note, because I'd like confirmation from members. The idea is for the June meeting it'll be a 10 a.m. start instead of 9:30. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. Right,
Chairman, if I can, it's just, sorry, a brief observation. There's a slight difference in the dates proposed on the work programme as they appear on the agenda under the next item. So if I can just confirm, the work programme reflects the right dates. So the 30th of May that appears on the next agenda item no longer exists. It's now the 27th of June. So the work programme is the right dates.
So the 27th of June, right.
So the 30th of May is a clerical error, Chairman.
Okay. Okay, that happens. Okay. Right, thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you. One of our longer ones.